All right, this is class 10. We're all very happy to be here. It shows on everyone's faces.
So is this the halfway point?
Yeah, after this lesson, we will be halfway through the course.
Really?
Yep, so,
That's a lot faster than I thought it would
yeah, it went by pretty dang quick. I don't know about John. Last time I talked to him, he was pretty disappointed, but I'm pretty happy with the progress you guys have made. So,
I was saying that because he's not here. He was acting.
absolutely, because he's not here. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, yep. Okay, Christy just got here. Good.
See, now it's keeping the same input to the next one.
All right. So, before we discuss the homework, I want to go back over some of our stuff that we went over last week. What does modulo do? Gives the remainder. So it's another standard operator, just like plus, minus, divide, multiply. If I did 17 divided by 12, what would it give me? 17 mod 10. 7. Right? 17 mod 10, 7. 17 mod 12, 5. Okay? All right. What is a hash? What was that?
He's trying to do the pound key.
It is a data structure.
I like the way this is starting.
Keys and definitions.
Key value pairs.
Key value pairs. That's
Exactly
perfect.
what I just
Okay. What are some of the constraints that a hash has?
Keys are the same.
You have one key,
You only have one key name.
but you can have many values.
Well, a key can't have many values.
Keys are unique, but
Right.
A key can only point to one thing, right? But you can have duplicated values. Right. Okay? We'll see some hashes being used tonight. Does anybody still have trouble grasping what a hash is, how it kind of operates? Okay. Everybody feels pretty comfortable with arrays now and loops. Looping, basic loops, for each, that kind of thing. The concept is there because you're going to need that for your homework this evening.
How about a refresher on loops?
They go round and round.
Great.
No, we'll do a refresher in our exercise. So,
That'd be lovely.
all right. So the Rails stack. Okay. What did we talk about last time with regard to Rails? What kind of web framework is it? What paradigm does it follow?
Oh, REST.
Okay, that is a paradigm. That's not the design paradigm I was going for, but what is the design, the organizational pattern it chooses to follow?
The MVC.
MVC, that's right. Okay, what does MVC stand for?
Model view controller.
All right. Okay, I think. All right. Yeah, Nick's not going to be here with us. So, all right, we talked about a couple of those that were always required when making a static web page application. And what two pieces were those? Not with resources. In a Rails application, if I made a web application that was just a home page, what two pieces of that model view controller stack do I have to have?
The model and the view. No.
No, controller in the domain.
Well, the domain is
The
the
model.
model. Controller and the view.
The controller and the view. There were only so many combinations.
No.
You guessed that one, didn't you? All right, so we're going to go back over that tonight because I know that's all very new material. Remember, the model is not required for a static page. The only time a model is needed is when you have some kind of data or business logic you want to perform. And then what you would do is you would show kind of a particular representation of that model on the screen. Okay? And you use a view to do that. So the controller is what ties together your actions and your views with your domain. And remember, our domain layer is where kind of our models live. All right? So let's go over our homework. Saw some good stuff, saw some weird stuff, but not nearly as weird as the last one. This one went pretty well. Everybody who attempted it seemed to do pretty good with it. So would you kill the light, please? Thank you. So this is one of the homework assignments. David's. We had it up just a second ago looking at it before class. And this is something that I saw in several people's homework as well, where inside each of the methods that denoted a different type of calculator operation, add, subtract, multiply, divide, so on, the same lines were repeated to get the first number, to get the second number, and then you add them together. And a couple of you talked to me about how you tried to refactor that to get rid of the repetition. That actually makes me really, really happy because you're headed down the right direction. The problem you ran into was you just didn't know how. And in the example that we're about to go over here in a minute of this application, you'll see how, or one way to have refactored that to get rid of that duplication. So let's see. There was one, I can't remember whose it was now. I had it up. It might have been yours, Navy Dave. But you had a question in there, I think, that I wanted to address. Was it yours? No, it was not. I think it was Nick's. Let's see.
That was your question before you just had up.
You talked so much trash that you had it right so quickly.
I did. I had it right just like.
All right, here we go. All right, so Nick had his right here. Okay. He's printing out his main menu. He starts his loop. Okay. He has his case statements that run and do different operations if each individual option is selected. Okay. All that works. But he says here, I tried to put a private here so that all these functions would be isolated to the class. That way it wouldn't be exposed to the outside world. But he said when he did that, his code started blowing up saying that there was a no method error. Okay, why was that happening? Looking at his code right here.
It ended. Go up. Is that it?
Huh? No, it's
Oh, okay, never mind. I thought.
why is it saying no method error when he tries to do add nums? Given his question here.
Right.
Where's private?
He said he had it there and it wouldn't work, so he took it out. Yeah.
He had it before the add nums?
He had it, yeah, right there. Well, we talked about private visibility before, right? And some of you had this issue on, I think, a couple of assignments ago with a similar case to this, where we had a case statement, different options were being selected, and many people said self dot whatever, which is not required in this instance. Okay, you don't have to say self dot add nums right here for it to see the method. Okay, but you can. His problem is that he tried to put private here. That is above where his implementation methods are, so he could hide the implementation. I agree with that. I think that should be done. But the problem is, when you do that, you lose the ability to call any private methods with self. Okay? So if he had put private here, he could have had all of these methods private. The only method that could have been executed outside of this class would have been main menu. Okay? But he would have had to remove all of these selves because they're not visible from a sender standpoint. Okay?
So that works with the while loop inside the main menu method?
No, his example doesn't work perfectly, but I wanted to show that problem. With this particular scenario, he does something a little bit odd. This part does not loop that you see right here. Okay? He's actually calling self.mainMenu again here on his else, and he's starting a second loop inside of this loop
A loop inside of a loop.
every time.
That seems to get right.
Okay.
Even if you exit?
Well, if he exits, the program would end. He'd stop running. Okay. And all of the loops would cascade in running because they're all checking against the same running flag.
Okay.
Was there a method that says exit?
Yeah, self.exit right here. And it sets running to false. So, anyway, not the most optimal way to do that. The best way to do this would be to have the while at the top here and have the print menu inside of the while, and then grab the selection and you loop the whole block. Okay? Does anybody have any other questions about this piece of the homework?
Yeah, after I did, as you saw, my instance variables, which equal get input as integer, now it's keeping that same integer throughout the rest of my, like if I did an add, then I go down to multiply and it keeps the same two integers.
So you broke it.
Yeah. I can push it up real quick.
Push it up, and we'll look at it during the break. I'm going to go ahead and go over our examples. Okay? So, I wrote a few examples here. Let me see.
Maybe your example.
All right. Now, obviously my main method, very short. Okay. Now, I have several files over here that you can see. Okay, I have calculator, cool calculator, and cooler calculator. Those are the three different versions of the same class that I wrote. You only use two of them at a time. You only use main and calculator or main and cool calculator. And I'm only requiring one of them at a time in main, so they're not conflicting with one another. So we'll start by looking at calculator, which is the mirror copy of what I expected y'all to kind of do.
Since you have three of them only, shouldn't it be calculator, cooler, calculator, coolest calculator?
Boom.
I stand corrected.
Boom.
Or maybe I didn't think the first one was very cool.
Oh, just wondering.
Maybe I should have called it not cool calculator. Uncool calculator.
That's pretty discriminatory.
So, right here, you'll see that I do pretty much the same thing all y'all are doing. I have my running set to false. When I start running, I set it to true. You don't want it set to true before you call run. Why? If someone were to call a method that returned whether or not it was currently running, it would say it was when it actually wasn't. Right? So, here we set it to running when we start actually looping. And then I say, while I'm running, I print the main menu. I prompt for the selection, and that selection gets passed into the process. Same steps as the last exercise we did. Okay? And this is the same as well. We have our case statement, so the selection comes in. If it's 1, it does this, 2, it does this, 3, it does this, so on and so forth. If it's anything other than 0 through 5, it prints out that's not a selection. And no matter what they choose here, unless it's 0 for stop, the loop keeps going. If it's stop, I set running to false, and the loop up there ends and it prints out goodbye. Okay? All right, so here's where y'all had your first question about the redundancy down here. Okay? So if you look at what I did, oh, that's a little cut, isn't it? Let me see here. Let's maximize this. There we go. All right. So if you look at this, I know I've got to use two numbers, right? I've got a prompt for two numbers. So like some of you did, I made a method called prompt for numbers. Okay? I also had a helper method called prompt for numbers. Some of you had that too. I think y'all reused some of the methods that we had in our earlier example. Perfectly fine. I grabbed the first and second number, but I can only return one thing from a method, can't I? I can't return multiple items from a method. So I know I've got two of them. Why don't I return an array with those two numbers in it? So that's what I did. So I'm making an array here with the first number and the second number that they entered, and that array is being returned from this method because it's the last line of execution. So for instance, if they chose to add, they get prompted for those two numbers, and then that array gets set here in this variable. Alright? Then I print the result, which runs this and just dumps a number in here, whatever number I pass it, and I do my mathematical operation. The number in the first spot of the array plus the number in the second spot of the array. Make sense? So that's how I got rid of the redundancy.
Where's that plus numbers come from? I mean, where's the numbers, that one, I'm sorry.
This,
The result numbers,
that's this guy.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's a local variable that is being assigned from this method.
If you would've put a period there, would've it done the same thing? Print result? Not
Print
period?
result period numbers?
Yeah.
No.
Cause you couldn't call on the.
Print result is a method,
Yeah.
not an object. You can only do dot something on an object. That's why self dot something works, because self is an object. You're not talking about the class, you're talking about the instance of that object at the time, right?
There's still a lot of repetition though.
There is, and I'm about to show you some more ways of getting rid of some more of it. And this next way, I chose to do it because it uses hashes. So, this is my first take at it. I wanted you to see it with the requirements we gave y'all. This is the cool calculator. All right. So you'll notice up here, inside my initializer, my running false isn't the only thing. Okay. I have an options instance variable here, which is a hash. What type of key do I have here?
Looks like integers.
They are integers. That's my key. I'm using integers for my key. What does this rocket here mean?
Hash rocket.
What does that hash rocket mean?
The key to the value.
Okay, it's pointing the key to a particular value, right? What is this?
A semicolon and the word at.
Yes. What is that?
The value.
Assume it's
The
a
parent.
method, but-
We haven't talked about that yet. All right.
Ask us a question.
Huh?
I said he asked.
But you're right. It's a method.
See? Right, either way.
Now, what this is called in Ruby is a symbol. Okay? A symbol is a very weird type that you will see in Rails because they use them a lot in the place of strings sometimes. Okay? But never strings that are going to be shown to the user. Unique strings that represent something in state, for instance. Okay? The reason why I do this here is because under the hood, the way Ruby actually works, methods on objects are recorded as symbols. Their names are recorded as symbols. Okay? So I point 1 to the symbol add, I point 2 to the symbol subtract, 3 to the symbol multiply, and so on and so forth, 0 to stop. Okay?
So that on Rails it refers to methods as symbols? Is that what you're saying?
Methods are methods,
Okay.
but it'll make sense here in a second, because I'll show you how it's run. Okay? So all of the rest of this code through here is pretty well the same until we get to process. Okay? There's process. I prompt for my selection, that's identical. But process doesn't have a case statement in anymore, does it? There is no case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, case 5, case 0, whatever. Right?
Nope.
What I do is I say, all right, I'm going to return out of here and I'm going to stop saying that's not a valid selection unless the options hash has a key matching the selection that they entered. So if they entered 56, not a valid selection, the loop keeps going. Okay? If they entered 0, if they entered 1, if they entered 2, if they entered 3, okay, well yes, options hash has that key, right? So this right here we talked about, options selection, okay, that's me passing the key in, right, to the hash to get the value back. Well, we haven't talked about send yet, have we?
No.
All right. Send is a very special method that every Ruby object has. All right? If you give send a symbol and that symbol matches the name of a method, that object will run that method for you. Okay? Seems kind of useless when you think about it. Well, why don't I just call the method? Right? Well, if you don't know what method's being executed, like in this case, you have several different options, that can come in pretty handy because all I have to do is say send subtract. And it knows to execute the subtract method. So then my subtract method code runs. All right? A little weird, but I want that to be your kind of an introduction to hashes and symbols.
Why is add options your object?
It's not.
Well, you just, okay. Maybe you confused me then because you said after with a period, you only do that when you're calling on an object. So you have it here. What?
So he's getting up.
Options is an object.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Hashes are objects, but it is not your main object.
Which would be the calculator.
The calculator, yes.
Okay.
If you said self in here somewhere, what's self pointing at?
Calculator.
Right. So when I
The whole
call
class.
send,
Uh-huh.
it's calling send on calculator.
Okay.
So I'm calling send. I'm passing it what is returned from this.
Is it because add options is defined in your initialize as your calculator as well? Or no, you're still just calling it on itself?
Send it. Basically, I'm doing this. Okay. I'm passing that in. If I wanted to show it a little bit different, I could say okay, because this is my hash, right? You remember if I gave remember our example from yesterday, if I had a hash
Oh yes, you have to have
and
a base symbol.
I said hash 1 would return the word 1, right? From our example yesterday. We had 1 pointing at the text 1, right?
Mhm.
So if I said h1 here, it would return me the word the word 1. So here, options selection's a number, right? I made that selection. Okay? So it grabs that key, passes the key to the hash, The hash gives me back the value for that key.
Okay.
And that value is the method that I want to call, so I'm calling send on it. You won't use send very often in Ruby, but I thought it'd be a kind of cool way of introducing hashes in a real world scenario. So
I was just confused about it, the word add options being an object.
yeah,
I didn't think about it in the sense of it being a part of the calculator.
yeah,
Okay.
that's perfectly all right. Everything in Ruby technically is an object.
Yeah.
So you aren't wrong in your thought process, but data structures are objects. So hash is an object, an array is an object. That's why you can say, you can do find on an array. You can do select on an array. You can do each on an array. Each is a method. So an array is an object. Okay. All right, so let's get this dummy code out of here. And that's pretty well all the uniqueness for this one. I'll go ahead and show you one that trims down repetitiveness even more, just for kicks. But I'm not going to spend much time on it because it's going to be confusing to look at. But it gets rid of all of these methods right here, but will still work.
What is strings?
Put strings.
Oh, strings is where I put my menu.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, what's a module?
We haven't talked about modules yet.
Didn't think so.
Making it complicated for us.
Nah, that's simple. Basically, I'm just assigning a variable somewhere. We talked about constants, remember?
Capital.
Capital letter
Yeah,
variables
Yeah,
that aren't going to change.
that's something.
Yep. That menu's never going to change, right? It's just a multi-line constant. So,
You're using it amongst your cooler, and just that bland calculator.
yep, that way I don't have to write it in all those different places, so I'm just printing it out here.
What the hell is %Q?
That's something weird in Ruby.
Cool.
Ruby has a lot of weird things like this you're just going to have to get over time. %Q is a way of building a block string without having to add a bunch of lines together and do string concatenation. So anything between those two curly braces is part of the string.
No quotes or.
You don't have to do quotes or anything like that. Anything in between there goes. So it's a pretty handy way of building one. It'll use it as is, the new lines and everything. It even would put a tab here if I did tab. But, you know, there's only so many places you can use this effectively because you don't want string builders like this to affect your formatting. So, anyway, cooler calculator. I still have my options hash, but this thing went down to 57 lines of actual running code.
I was happy with 80.
So options here now is a little bit different. I still have the same concept, right? But what are my symbols now? I have a plus, minus, multiply, divide, and mod actual operators, but they're symbols. Now, why do I have those? It's because plus, minus, multiply, divide, they're all methods on an integer. So why can't I call them? So I do that the same way I did my add, subtract, multiply, divide methods. So right here, instead of calling send on my calculator object and passing it multiply or subtract, I take the first number and I call send on it and pass it the operator with the second number as a parameter. Little hacky way of doing that. And then all of my add and subtract methods and stuff like that go away. But
Only because Ruby recognizes those as already given methods.
yep.
Okay.
Anyway, a little weird way of doing it. So the reason I wrote it a couple different ways is to show you that there's a lot of different ways to solve the same problem.
Yeah.
Okay? And there's good ways of doing it and there's bad ways of doing it. This way is cool. I considered it a bad way though, because it's not very readable now. It's not very quick or easy for someone to understand, right? if someone went down there and saw, oh God, numbers 0, send, operator, numbers, well, oh God, I'd be pretty pissed off if I had to dig through a large application that had something like this going on in it. But hashes will be hashes, and that's a pretty cool use of them. So,
Is there any benefit to like saving lines memory-wise? Like, is there a point where?
not really. But like all this white space and stuff like that, you see,
Yeah.
when the interpreter runs through this file, or when a compiled language compiles one of these source files, all that white space goes away.
I mean, like, so mine was 110 lines.
Yeah.
And yours is 57. Like,
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not that much of a difference in the
No.
grand scheme of things, but is there a point where that
Not really.
difference is gonna
It becomes more of a question of what you do with those 110 lines than those 50 lines. It's a matter of how efficient your code is versus how readable it is versus how,
Much time and effort you want to put into it.
well, there's usually, and I think I talked about it before, there's really 3 things you kind of want to balance: code readability, okay, code maintainability, and efficiency of your code. And efficiency boils down to 2 things: how fast is it versus how much memory does it take up. And with Ruby, you don't have to worry about a lot of those as long as you don't jump off any ledges. For instance, if I put a big loop inside of 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 a big loop, and I did that with an array, telling it to try to sort that array, and that array had 10 million integers in it,
Wasn't a very good idea.
okay? You might run out of memory. You might not, big computer, but you might. I wouldn't consider that very efficient. You only need 1 loop to sort an array, or 2 loops to sort an array, depending on the sorting algorithm you're using. Anyway,
Really, just 10 seconds or less. The reason you run false at the beginning was what now? Just in case somebody tried to call it on.
okay, we'll go back to our root one here. So running false?
Yeah.
Okay. When I say calculator new, I get back a new object. That object is a calculator, correct? Is it running yet?
No, it's not.
I mean, it's not looping yet, is it?
No, it's not.
When does it start looping? When I
ask-
call run on it, right? So why would I have the state reflect something it's not doing?
Oh.
Make sense?
So for our example the other day, the reason why we all did probably the same thing, keeping that running true, was just because it's a console application. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We were just speed. Okay.
Yeah. So running is false to start with. It only becomes true when I actually start running, and then it becomes false when I stop. Okay.
Run is not a method built into Ruby. It only
No.
works because we built that method.
Correct. Yep.
That would be-
Every method here, process, stop, all of these, we've defined them. And if you happen to ever write a method that already exists as a name in the Ruby language on that object, yours will take precedence. Yours will override it. Well, that's a function, but yes, you
For those who are listening, it was the other dude.
anyway, so that's the homework. I'm glad to see that most people seem to not have a big issue with that. Hmm?
How did you get your folders out to the left?
What are you talking about?
Little folders.
Talking about here?
Yeah.
If you go to project
Uh-huh.
and add folder to project,
Oh.
you can select a folder, and for instance, I can select this, hit open, and it adds that folder here.
Oh, so you can go back and forth without that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I had a couple of different things I wanted to bring up. So anyway, all right. So that's our calculator example. Like I said before, we do have a guest speaker tonight, Duke. I You want to go ahead and do your piece?
Sure.
All right. Do you want the light on or off?
Off.
All right.
I don't want to distract him with my.
Okay. Little. Duke is a coworker of mine. We worked together for several years now, both on personal projects and over at Synapse when it was still called Synapse, and then Sky Coach for a little while. And he still works over here, and he's running the web design and development shop here that we have for websites. And so he's going to talk a little bit about what he does and bring a little more clarity to what we were talking about with HTML and CSS and JavaScript best practices the other day.
I hope. So, yeah, I'm Duke. Just a little about me. I started off, I was big in art in high school, big in art in college. And then at one point, about my senior year actually, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do for a living. Because as an artist, you still gotta pay your bills. And listen to a lot of my friends in my design program, manager at the Gap after they graduated, worked at Target. I'm not even joking. Most of the people, even the really talented people in my classes, had a really hard time finding work. So I got real lucky. My wife's in business, and she was a marketing major. She had did an internship, and it was the guy that she was doing internships had told her, "Hey, Crystal, you know anybody who can do a website?" She called me, and I said, "Yeah, I can do a website." And that weekend, I learned how to make websites. And 2 weeks later, I had a check for $3,000 in my hand, and I went, "Okay." I figured, yeah, this is what I'll do. When I first started doing this, long ago, in the 90s, late 90s, like 98, when I was still a design student, and then when I started getting into the web stuff, it was about 2000. 2001 was when I did my very first website, and it was a lot different. Like legitimately, you would create something in Photoshop, cut up the images, slap them in there, make rollover states, and you were done. There's no HTML really if you wanted to make a fancy, beautiful website. If you wanted to make a horrible looking website, you could use HTML. But there wasn't CSS, there was JavaScript, but it really wasn't being used online a whole lot for the kind of websites I did and everything. So we did what we could. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that still do really bad websites, and they get away with it, and they make the rest of us look bad. But so I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about why we use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I don't speak well in front of people, so I'm going to be reading a lot. But HTML is a markup language composed of elements which contain attributes. So the elements that we're talking about is like a div tag. I don't know how familiar, how far you guys have gone into that kind of stuff, but an element is like div, and then your attribute would be like div ID equals footer, or sorry, I guess the element itself is the ID. But with HTML, you want to write these things as semantically as possible. So you have your div tag, you have, in this example I'm giving you, ID equals footer. So what does that tell you that div is going to be? It's going to be your footer of your website. Again, when you're talking about code, you want to make it readable. You want people to be able to go in there and look at it and know what they're looking at.
I have no idea what that was. Yeah.
A boil.
Okay, fun.
Dermatology or us.
Now, when we're talking about HTML, yeah, you can have a website with just HTML. It's going to look like a Word document, basically. It's not going to be interesting. It's not going to be you could use inline styling if you wanted to. Back in the day when we first started using styling, if I made a 20-page website and I wanted to change one navigation item on one page, or like the header style on one page, I would have to go change it on 20 different pages. On every single header on that website, or you know, like H1, H2, every single style for that section header, I would have to go to every single page and do that. So that's where CSS comes in. Now we made websites, the styling separated from the actual markup language. So now if we wanted to style a particular thing in a website red, we would write some CSS that said this class is red, give it the thing, and then apply that class to a particular style. Now anything that says div class equals red, everything would be red. So if I wanted to change that to a different shade of red, I just change that CSS and it applies to everything that's marked red. So now we're starting to make things more modular with HTML, and now we've got the CSS.
So this is the inline styling he's talking about right here.
Yeah.
We showed you that the other week for some quick examples. That's pretty well a no-no these days.
This is another example, like your H3, you can write CSS that applies to every H3 without adding a class to your website. Same with paragraph, you can apply CSS that add style to every paragraph in your website. So if you want to change your font, you do it in a CSS, it changes everything at once. Man, that was cool when that happened.
That was a revolution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also going to talk about JavaScript real briefly. I am not what I would call an expert in JavaScript, but it's my goal to get there. JavaScript is a scripting language that allows you to add behavior to your web pages. So if you need to validate a form, provide drag and drop functionality, and just a lot of animation, which now that there's HTML5 and CSS3, you can start doing some of that thing. Things are always changing, and I'm going to get to that, but JavaScript is if HTML is the framework of the house and CSS is the paint, you know, JavaScript is your electricity and your, you know, gas and the things that really make your website come alive. It really makes it a functional, interactive experience, I guess. Can you make websites without JavaScript? There's been lots of websites that I don't really use a whole lot of JavaScript in. They're more like brochure type websites, but I would say probably 99 out of 100 websites I make have some sort of JavaScript functionality going on, whether it's a contact us form or if you're embedding like a Google map, that's all built, you know, with JavaScript. So it's very much becoming, and has been for a while, the language of the web. You know, I was looking the other day at some websites because I was curious that are 100% built in JavaScript, and I was just like, no. But I mean, JavaScript is very advanced. It's one of those things that you can dig into, and you can do a lot with a little knowledge until something breaks, and then you're like, oh, Jeremiah, help me. Whereas HTML and CSS, there's tutorials all over the internet. I highly recommend if you're gonna actually stay and continue doing this thing, you know, learn it. It's not hard. HTML and CSS is not hard to learn. It's extremely difficult to master, and more so than that, the design end of it takes years if you want to get into design. And again, I'll go over that kind of at the end. But one of the things I also wanted to talk about was structure of a website. It's extremely important when you're building a website, just as when you're building an application. You have to make sure that you layer your dependencies properly. You cannot have this thing run if there's something that it depends on to make this run before this runs, you know what I mean? So you can't turn on the light switch, even if you have a light switch, if you don't have any electricity in the house. So you're gonna make a lot of these mistakes. I still do. Sometimes things won't work. I'll be like, I did everything right, and I'll be like, oh, that needs to go after that. or you'll miss one bracket or one quotation somewhere that will blow everything up, and you will pull your hair out because you've been working on this thing for 9 hours, and the last thing you notice is one quotation mark or one, you know, and it's gonna happen. And then when you figure it out, you wanna go jump off a bridge because you just wasted 9 hours trying to figure out one quotation mark. But I'm not trying to sound too negative, but it's one of those things that's gonna happen, and you're gonna learn from it, and you're gonna get better. It can be frustrating sometimes, but if you really like it and you really enjoy what you're doing, if you really enjoy this class, and you find yourself thinking about it when you're not actually working on it, you know, this doing what you guys are doing, it can't be a hobby. This business, whether it's web design, application design, you can't do it part-time. It changes so fast. If you aren't constantly learning something, then you're gonna fall behind. And there's always people coming up and learning more and obsessed with it.
A lot of people do, as an example of what you just said, a lot of people do music as a hobby on the side. You know, they're in a band, or they learn to play an instrument or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Music theory has been pretty well the same for centuries now. The foundations of the way we program in software engineering and the way we do website development and the growth of the internet in general completely changes every few years. New frameworks come out every day.
I was gonna say, not only every few years, tomorrow something could happen. Somebody could come up with something that would drastically change the way we do everything. And if you don't already understand what you're doing, and now there's something else new out there, you're gonna be like, oh no. So you know, I don't really have a whole lot of technical things to really talk about. If you want to learn how to build a website, go to the Code Academy, go to W3 schools, do some tutorials. It's not hard. It's not near as complicated and complex to get into as what he's teaching you. It really isn't, but it is a very difficult thing. It's not hard to learn to get into. It's hard to master though. I look at the people who build websites all over this town, you know, especially when I start you'll always have doubts about this no matter what you do. You're always worried, oh man, you know, somebody's gonna come in and start doing this better than me or whatever. But whenever I have doubts, I'll go out there and look at my competition and the people that are competing in this industry, what I'm doing around here. And I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I feel extremely happy to know that all of my hard work is paying off, because I don't think there's anybody in town that can hold a candle to what I do. And I can say that with confidence, and I can say that with pride, because I take what I do very seriously. And it doesn't stop when I leave this building at 5 o'clock. You know, I'll sit there in front of my computer in the evening when I'm sitting with my wife, and I'll be learning something new. You can look at my phone and all the articles that I read constantly when I'm just sitting here, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read this new thing about CSS. And so, if you want a job that you can go home at 5 o'clock and not have to think about what you're doing, then I'm not gonna say leave, but you know, really consider your options after you're done with this course, because this isn't like being a history teacher or a math professor. You know, math, you know, history, that's all done. You know, you can go do your thing and go home. You can do work a regular 9-to-5 job, which to be honest with you, sometimes I sit there and go, damn, why didn't I just get, you know, why don't I cut grass for a living or something? Because it can be very overwhelming if especially when stuff happens. You know, you might get a call and say, hey, everything you've done in the past 4 days is now broken. And there's a client that's about to rip their head off and murder you, and you're just like, ah. So it's not like being a surgeon, you know, because I always come back and I'm like, well, they're not gonna die. But if you take what you're doing seriously, there can be you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly
you take what
you're
you're and you take what you're doing extremely seriously, and it's more than just your job, it's your passion too. And that's why a lot of, I mean, like him, that's what he does in his spare time. He goes home and he learns something new, or keeps working on something that he's done, or reworks something that he's done 5 times already to see if he can do it better. It can be an extremely rewarding career. You can find if you're good at what you do, you can write your own salary. I mean, I won't say you can sit there and make $250,000 a year or anything, but there's no reason why you can't make the top 5% of the normal income of people, you know, the everyday person, you know, out there. You can look at jobs all day and make six figures, you know, sitting behind the desk, doing what you do. That's not bad. You know, job security, this is an industry that's growing. It's going to continue to grow.
It is competitive, though.
It is competitive. There are a lot of people who are hungry, so that's why I say you got to stay on top of it. You start slacking off, there's going to be somebody there waiting to take your position that wants to do what you're doing, and they're willing to bust their ass to do it. So now that I've said negative stuff mixed with positive stuff, I really wouldn't change what I do. I love it. I look forward to doing what I do every day. You know, if you find a passion for it, pursue it. You know, this class isn't going to be the end for you if this is what you want to do. You're going to have to keep learning. You're going to have to either, you know, go to school to learn some more, or really take more classes like this, learn tutorials on the side, keep in touch with Jeremiah. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to send, you know, to tell you, hey, try this project. So, you know, it's get an internship somewhere. They'll work you to death for little money for, you know, 6 months, and then if you prove yourself, then you got a good job. And
Sometimes no money.
Right? Yeah, true. I did an unpaid internship for what I was doing for a while, and but you know, it's where the world's going. If you're doing this, you're going to be in the middle of things. You know, think what would happen tomorrow if all of a sudden all your computers, phones, everything went away.
I would go away.
He would just dissolve into
Yeah.
mist. But I mean, you know.
I do well. Gotta be well rounded.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, but and have fun. Find like-minded people. You know, find a community. Because you know, a lot of friends I used to be friends with, I'm not friends with anymore because I just, you know, they can hang out and do their own thing, and I'm like, man, I gotta learn something new today. I gotta figure it out. So it's fun though. It's fun. It's something you can really get into and learn more.
Yeah, CSS and JavaScript and HTML. JavaScript aside, maybe just HTML and CSS, like he said, is very hard to master, because, you know, like we looked at that calculator example. There's 5 billion different ways I could write that app. I could probably, I don't know. I'm not even going to go into how many different languages we could write it in, but my point is that there's sometimes good ways and bad ways to do things. It takes experience to get you to recognize, I probably shouldn't do it this way. HTML and CSS, you're going to run into a lot of that. You'll make it work, and then you'll regret it later.
And I guess I should go over that a little bit too when you're, and sorry I'm taking a little bit more time than I planned, but I have an intern. Well, she's not an intern anymore. She got hired on full time, but she was a design student, and I kind of took a leave because she was really a go-getter. And she's done very well. She's been doing it for 2 years now. You know, she can create a website. She's an amazing artist, but her design skills in web design are I mean, if you saw one of the sites that she designed from scratch, you'd probably be like, people are paying for that. And I'm not trying to be hard. It's an experience thing. It takes time. Same with her HTML. There's certain things you need to know when you're doing this stuff. How do you keep your file size, small so that things load fast? How do you optimize images? I'll see all day long people loading five megabyte images, which is 25 megabytes, which you're trying to load on your cellular device. You go to too many of those websites, it's going to be ridiculous when the whole website itself should be under 1 megabyte. There's experience things that you're going to learn over time that you don't even know to ask the questions about. And you really need to find somebody who's experienced, who's willing to teach you these little tricks and things like that to help process help you get through the process. And again, I don't know if any of you guys are interested in web application development versus web design and you know, online marketing type situation, which I do a lot of. SEO, search engine optimization, making people be able to find people's websites quicker like that. But there's lots of different niches that you can get into that's end where he is and start where I am. You know, and the reason I say that is because what he does is I mean, I've been trying to learn some of it, and to be honest with you, it's an extremely different way of thinking for me, because I come from a design and an artist background. And likewise, you know, we've talked a lot about this with the things that I do. He looks at me, he's like, I don't understand how you do that. So, you know, when you find what you're interested in and what you're good at, grab a hold of it and run with it, you know, because I'm very guilty of trying to think, oh, what he does is more important than what I do, so I need to learn that. That's not necessarily the case. You know, people need what I do, people need what he does. But when you find what you do somewhere in the middle of this spectrum, you know, run with it and get good at it, and there's somebody that will hire you to be the expert at that. And when you're an expert at something, you're invaluable, especially when you're really good at what you do. So I guess that's about it, you know, life experience stuff, advice is basically what I came here. And to explain a little bit about web stuff. Again, if you're interested in building a website, Code Academy, Code School, W3 Schools is probably the best place that you want to go to learn the basics, ins and outs. You will, if you guys have been working through this, especially when you get through the class, you'll go there and look at HTML and CSS and be like, really? And you'll build a functional website that probably looks pretty ugly, but you'll get better, you know? So just keep at it. I'm sure you guys will do great. He's told me that you guys are doing a good job. He's pleasantly surprised with the progress of the course from people that were coming in that were relatively novice in this area. So, you know, you've impressed him, and if you can impress him, that's a pretty big feat, because this guy's pretty damn smart at what he does. So, if you guys ever have any questions about anything, you can email me up here, honestly. My email is duke@ecs-net.com.
I can put that in Slack too,
Yeah.
so some contact information.
Especially like career advice or, you know, direction.
Because when, you know, one thing I want us to be able to do in this course is kind of expose you to a lot of different career paths. This is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, me and Macy have been giving you one real picture of what it looks like in this industry, because we're both application developers and systems software developers, and Duke is kind of at a different end of another spectrum. You know, he's very very artistic, but he found a good place where he's able to make websites, design websites, do a plethora of other jobs that we're not really experts at doing, and he's probably one of the foremost in the region as far as a website developer goes. So
the thing is, if you get a guy like me working with a guy like him,
Limitless.
we can devastate a lot of stuff, because we complement one another's skills so well.
yeah, we've played so many games, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, we have.
Just
So,
raised whole planets, but
that's what you do, man.
yeah.
What, you usually use like WordPress and stuff for
No.
tutorials, or you can just start from scratch?
Yes.
I've used WordPress before. Try not to get into that trap. WordPress, I'll explain to you. WordPress is an open source blogging platform that people have bastardized into a quote CMS. I'll give you another example. There's a website.
CMS is a content
Oh, I'm
management
sorry.
system.
Content management system. It's a system where clients can log into the back end of their website and easily make updates via a graphic user interface that looks kind of like Microsoft Word or something, so they can insert images and things. Problem with WordPress, again, it is a blogging platform. It is open source, which every time they do an update, they release their code. If you don't update your WordPress website, it gets hacked and you lose everything, or worse, your website now your church website that you built for your pastor now shows all kinds of super inappropriate things that nobody should be seeing, because that's what they like to inject in there just to mess with people. And I'll give you an example. Northwest Louisiana Technical College came to us with a website they probably paid $25,000 for that has hundreds of pages of content that was built by a company in WordPress. They use, at this point, 39 different plugins. What a plugin is since WordPress is a blogging platform, the only thing that can extend that is the use of plugins. They needed a calendar, so they found a calendar plugin. Bam, great, now you have a calendar on your website. They needed all kinds of different plugins to make their website, rotating banner plugin, SEO plugin. Problem is anybody can make plugins. So, Joe over in Pakistan made a plugin that, you know what, that was a pet project, I'm not supporting it anymore. Bam, website blows up. They want me to fix it. Guess what? I can't fix it because I did not create this plugin. So a lot of people will sell WordPress because it's easy for the average person to find a template, plug it in, and a lot of people do it. And it's actually, in my opinion, it's like selling a really bad used car that you've just kind of soldered together, yeah, and it works for a while, and you hope it works for a long while so you keep making money off of these people. But it's not true web development. It's not true to what we do. Is it easy to make money off of? Sure. If you want to do it, go for it.
WordPress is the Dollar General of websites.
Randy
I
tried to
think.
sell us on WordPress when we were going to.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. WordPress has its places for blogs.
Yeah. It's blogging.
That's a blogging platform.
Mhm.
I had to say Downtree.
Okay.
But Joomla, Drupal, those are open source, but they're actually content management systems. I use one called Adobe Business Catalyst, which is built by Adobe. It's hosted by Adobe. It's a little bit more expensive, but in the 4 years I've been using it, over 70 websites I've built in it. I've had 0 hacks. I can count on 2 hands the amount of support tickets that have come in that I've had to fix things with, and it's been flawless. And it will probably run you about 30% more than a WordPress website, but I guarantee you're going to save that money in the first year of support costs. So, and it's fast. WordPress is so slow.
It's really fast.
I wanted to, if you don't mind, I was typing out a few questions for you. Just,
Sure.
In your opinion, let's see which one. Do you feel like your artistic prowess helps you though?
Yes.
Okay, I figured you were gonna say that. Kind of like when you saw it, I can't draw, but I can see cool images.
You
Sure.
see, you're in a similar position than I probably am. When he was referring to me, sometimes looking at his work and go, I don't understand how you do that. Duke can sit there and literally just almost spit at the screen, and some magical website appears there that he just constructed in 15 minutes. I can't do that. I don't have an eye for it. I can make a judgment call. Oh, this looks good. Or, oh, this doesn't look good. And I'm generally pretty decent at that, but his artistic ability is...
Let me give you some advice though, before we go too far into that. And I'm going to give away a secret. A lot of people will sit there and, tell me, wow, you're so blessed at what you do. I can't believe you were born with this talent. I appreciate where they're coming from, but that, part of my friend says bullshit. I worked my ass off to become good at web design. My first website, it was so horrendous. I mean, even by the day standards, there are things you learn. If you really want to learn how to do web design, go pick up some books on web design. They will teach you simple things like, and you know the difference between what looks good and looks bad. Everybody can look at a website, whether you're a designer or not, and look at it and go, there's something janky about that. They will teach you about margin size. They will teach you about typography. It's not any mysterious thing. It takes time, it takes practice, and it takes learning, just like what you're learning through Jeremiah. anybody in this room, regardless of your artistic background, your experiences, you included, can learn it. He sits there and says, I could never do that. You could do it. It takes time to learn it. Yeah, when I was an artist in high school, I drew pictures of people and dogs and sculpted weird things because I'm kind of a weirdo like that. But I mean, you know, skeletons with guitars and, you know, crazy stuff. It has nothing to, well, I am, you know that. It's an artist thing. But maybe you can't learn that. Maybe you can't learn how to sculpt a skeleton with a guitar because you never think of it. But websites are not skeletons with guitars. They are brochures. They are mathematically eye-pleasing things, you know. So if you're really interested, pick up the book, read it.
That tied into the next two questions, which were, how many hours a day do you think, and I say this from my point of view, I guess, is I'm a full-time worker,
Sure.
you know, as we all are, but I work in something that's not in computers.
Okay.
But, and I was telling Jeremiah this, or asking him too, was how many hours should I devote, if I can devote, I don't know, set hours, should I devote to make myself better without, you know, getting fired at work or playing on the computer.
What do you do in your spare time? Just the rest of us hang out, watch TV, play games, hang out with family,
Yeah.
drink, party?
Yeah, in those 4 hours, 5 hours after work, yeah. You know, just relax, bring it down.
Sure. My advice, get a laptop while you're relaxing watching TV. Have that in your lap, learn stuff, read stuff. When you're going to bed at night, read some design books. And then as soon as you can start getting out there and getting your name out there, apply for some stuff. Try and get feedback. You know, we would hire you, but your design stuff looks like garbage. Okay, well, good. Now, what about it? Oh, the colors are stupid. Okay, well, now I need to learn a little bit more color. You know, you have to, it's a hit and miss thing, but I would say once you get to a certain point, you're going to have to quit your day job and try and get an internship, even if it's paying you less to pursue those things. I guarantee you to pay off. I mean, I don't know what you do for a living, but when I started this job here, I wasn't getting paid great here, but I had to prove myself. And I got, within 4 years of being here, I've raised myself up to about 40% more than what I was making when I started. Tell me another job that you get a 40% raise over the course of 4 years. You know, because you prove yourself. I mean, there are some if you move up in tiers and stuff, but you know, you go from a web designer starting, working your ass off 60 hours a week to a web designer where now you're working 45 hours a week and now I'm making more money. Well, yeah, because I'm better at what I do. But it's possible, yeah. Just like I said, it's just how hungry you are. You know, it's how much you want it. You know, you're gonna make time for it if it's important to you.
True. So the last part of that was just how do you turn it off too? Because I'll be laying in bed trying to think about the homework, and I'm not even nowhere near where you two guys are at. And I'm sitting there trying to run methods in my brain, and like, how that's not going to
Do you
work.
have an answer for that one? Because I can't turn it off.
I go to sleep like that.
I've been having dreams about this shit. Like,
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. How you turn it off? I mean,
Um,
not that you.
Maybe that's your brain telling you don't quite have it all out of your system yet, and you need to study more.
more bank teller assignments.
Well, let me
To me,
put
that's
it.
a good sign, because when I was studying French and I lived in France,
I was about to
Yeah.
say that.
they told me to, you know, basically the family I stayed with, they knew no English. So I had to immerse myself in French.
Oh.
And I started having dreams in French. And I mean, that's when I knew that I was getting it.
I took
I
4
was
years of
starting
French in high school, and the second year, my French teacher said, when you start dreaming in French, you know that you're getting it.
Yeah.
So, now I will say it's.
I'm not saying I'm getting it in my. I'm not passing it yet.
No. I mean, there's nothing. It's just like anything else in your life that, you know. I'm sure that some nights, you know, before you started this, you'd lay in bed thinking about, oh, what do I got to do at work tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's just part of life, you know. You're not going to worry about it so much. It's like me. I don't sit there and think about, oh, JavaScript tomorrow. I think about what client is going to call me in the morning that I got to deal with. It's normal job stuff then. And
I'm usually thinking about coffee.
Man, that's my heart.
Alright, I have a question.
sure,
What is this?
it's
What-
a game.
I know that, but
Oh.
what like,
Parallax scrolling is what it's called.
Is that JavaScript
Yes,
stuff or is it?
yes. It's basically JavaScript is loading things one in front of the other and just changing the speed at which they scroll. Sorry, I've been looking at that game lately and I was
It's a lot of fun.
Is it really? Firewatch? Yeah, cool.
I'd recommend it.
That's a plugin that you can use with. It's real easy. Look it up sometime. Parallax, and when you mess with a website, just try and do one thing in front of the other. It's pretty cool.
Is that why Google will shut down Shockwave plugin and stuff, or whatever?
Different
Maybe
type
not
of
that.
different type of plugin.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, there's a number of things that can make your browser crash, just like computers. And you just restart your browser, all of a sudden it works, and you're like, oh, good.
Mhm.
Somebody wrote something wrong somewhere. They left out a quotation mark. So anyway, now that I've taken up about 3 hours of Jeremiah's time, and he's got 9 hours worth of stuff to teach me.
Yeah.
I don't even know what time. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay.
So
Appreciate it.
anyway,
Really, I'm serious about emailing me if you guys ever have
Oh,
any
don't
questions.
worry, I plan on
Awesome.
emailing you.
I will send you links of advice of where to go learn stuff. I will show you examples of other people. I will show you my first work versus my most recent work. And I'll tell you, I'm,
his
I'm-
most recent work too is something.
What was your most recent website?
That you can share.
I'm trying to think. No kidding. I do so many. Like last year, I did one called EscapeWatches.com, which is pretty cool. I did the HMVCPA website, which is a local website here. And I don't even know. I've done so many. Email me and I'll send you a bunch of links.
And a quick con to this too is, I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but unfortunately, when you're in my industry and his industry, sometimes you know better than the customer, and sometimes, sometimes they don't care. Yeah, you know that, oh well, look, this is proven. They've done scientific studies to show this will get you more traction on your site. This will make people stay longer on your site. You make it look this way, it looks kind of old. That's not the market you're wanting to go towards. Just make it all white. I don't care. I want it to look very 95.
I do a lot of attorney websites. They're always right, even when they're wrong. I've gotten in so much trouble before by like saying, well, this is the way you should do it. We don't want it that way. Here's some statistics backing my point just because I want to make sure that you guys understand. They get mad. Like, how dare you be right? You know? And I'm just trying to help them. I don't care. You want a brown and pink website that has feet all over it? Whatever.
So, dude, you're a good artist. You're just not a great salesman. That's what I'm just kidding.
No. Seriously, one day down the road, you'll be talking to an attorney about trying to sell them a website or an application, and you're just going to sit there and go,
I give up.
well, no, you're going to sit there and go, do I take his $15,000 and make him something I disagree with? Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Seriously, I mean, it really gets to that point where you're just like, okay, well, whatever. Something else I'm gonna say, and this is from a business standpoint. Don't compromise your prices. If you ever get to the point where you're doing what I do on the side, I'm adamant. I can't tell you how many clients I've said no to. They're like, well, you're charging us $5,000. This other person wants to charge us $3,000, and I'm like, you want quality or you want cheap?
You
That's
get what
fine.
you pay for.
And
Charge what you're worth.
And I will be honest with you about this. Sometimes it's hard. You gotta pay the bills. You're like, man, that $3,000 would come in super handy. But I will tell you what, I have had so many clients go spend $3,000 with a guy down the street, and 2 months later come back to me and have to spend $5,000 with me. So it's okay. It will turn around in the end. If you start compromising your prices, you'll beat yourself up because you'll start racing to the bottom, and before you know it, you'll be doing $1,000 websites that take you 80 hours to do instead of doing one $10,000 website. So And I'm not saying that's the direction you're going. You might go into web application stuff, and you might be working for a company that, you know, recognizes that quality matters, and that's great too, you know. So, don't, you know, and don't follow the money. That's the other thing. Follow what you like doing. If you like doing websites, great. If you like doing web app stuff, application stuff, great. If you find that you want to be a mobile developer, awesome. Find that niche and go after it, because this is too big of a time-consuming lifestyle to be consumed with stuff you hate doing. You know, if you're going to be consumed, enjoy it. Right?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna let Jeremiah get to his awesome instructifying. And
I appreciate it,
I
dude.
appreciate it. No problem.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Email me.
And I will put his contact information in Slack a little bit later. So,
Sounds good. All right, y'all have fun. Get smart.
Good try.
all right. So, I wanted to go ahead and do the guest speaker portion. The next portion, I think we'll do right after we have our break. It's close enough to where we can go ahead and kind of squeeze one in, I guess. So, let's take about a 5-minute breather, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about similarities between object-oriented languages, and then we'll jump back into Rails. So.